case, it was an intelligence problem. That project then scaled up to involve the US Department of State, which is where I got involved with it. And the idea was that people in countries where the government doesn't necessarily approve of all online activity could have an out. There could be a way for people to look at the web without it being monitored by their governments. And it continues today mostly with industry support. But the government builds these tools, and they're usable. They're available, they're usable, they're gettable. The NSA just released a new vulnerability assessment tool last month. It's out there, you can use this stuff. Providing training. The US federal government loves to train people, especially state and local people, on cyber stuff. The problem is we don't have enough people locally in the different states to do this. And all too often we get a phone call that says, there's training, it's available, you just have to get on a plane and go to Washington, D.C. And then sector partnerships. This is probably the hardest thing. The hardest, information sharing sounds good and it's hard to do. Public-private partnerships sound great, right? When you can get the public involved with industry on working on problems, it's wonderful. It's wonderful when it happens. It's also incredibly hard to do. If I bring 3 oil companies in here to talk about a cyber problem, the first thing that they're going to mention is, well, if Shell, Exxon, and Chevron are all talking, we have a potential antitrust problem. Because those 3 companies could be colluding in some way to influence energy markets. So just getting people around the table is hard. In the 1990s, the Clinton folks also created a mechanism for something called ISACs. It's an Information Sharing and Analysis Center. In Houston a few years ago, we created one. I held a bunch of meetings, and today there's a freestanding analysis center that serves the oil and gas industry in Houston, run by a former FBI agent. It's a clearinghouse. These companies can say, we think we're getting hit by X, and we need to know how to deal with it. Does anyone have any idea if this is going on? This is something that goes on today. There's also a government component to this, but the real problem is when government has juicy, important information, can it share it with the rest of the world quickly and easily? And setting aside the president's tweets, no. There are strongly enforced protocols that people like the president don't have to necessarily adhere to because they do make important policy decisions on their own. But for the bureaucrats who man positions in DHS and elsewhere, sharing information with the general public is something that they can get fired for or go to jail for. So this sharing is very hard to do. Okay, so threat intelligence. Can't go through any of this. Threat intelligence is a huge business. And I will say that the government is failing at this because there's a huge business in threat intelligence. Major corporations do not just interact with the US government on getting the intelligence they need. They interact with corporations like FireEye, CrowdStrike, others that do nothing but create reporting and analysis on cyber threats as they emerge. These companies are the bedrock of threat intelligence, not the US government. So this is the intelligence cycle, and what we're seeing is the problem is the government has lots of folks that can see things and they can make sense of things, but they may not be able to share things. Why? Well, it's something we refer to as the security equities problem. The security equities problem is very simple. Does the United States benefit from knowing about vulnerabilities on critical infrastructure elsewhere in the world? Yes. Does it stockpile vulnerability information? Yes. Does it buy vulnerability information even using clandestine sources by doing things like paying people off? Yes, that happens. I'm pretty sure of it. Some of the threat intelligence companies do some similar things. This is a real thing. The problem is that getting all this information to the right place at the right time to do the right thing is incredibly complex. And oftentimes, there's so much information that even if it's well shared, getting through all of it and understanding it and making sense of it as a recipient is hard. Now, there are some programs run under DHS, STIX and TAXI. I'm not going to go into them now. But these are automated systems, largely run by the MITRE Corporation in Massachusetts. They kick out data to your network that say, okay, here's a bad thing. You should be aware. Okay. So, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to give a few minutes for questions. But I want you to see this as an opportunity, especially if you're a graduate student in the now cybersecurity program in the UK. Is it approved? It's done. Now it's a degree in cybersecurity. You're all going to make more money. We live in a critical infrastructure, just megalopolis. We have, of course, oil and gas. We have midstream operations here on the Gulf Coast that dwarf anything else in the United States. Because of oil and gas, we also have kind of the co-integrated vertical of petrochem. That's a photograph of the Air Liquide plant down in Freeport. I'm glad it's in Freeport. It's far away from most people. Because Air Liquide builds chemical products that are dangerous to public health if they're released. We have the port. I sat through a briefing on ports of the 21st century. I'm like, we're already there. But the idea that human beings are going to offload cargo ships and put cargo containers on trucks driven by human beings in 20 years is probably not a thing. This is all activity that is becoming increasingly automated. Oh, and these ships that carry the containers, cargo ship crews are now what, under 20 people? Someone explained to me they hope to get the crew size down to the point where there are as many people involved in the operation of the ship as feeding and doing the laundry for the crew. So, crews of a half dozen people could be coming. Another story, the last few days it's made the news again. How do ships get around the ocean these days? Do people go out on the wing of the bridge with a sextant and plot it among the stars to drive the boat that way? No, they don't. They use GPS. Well, there are technologies now that spoof GPS systems. Russia has invested mightily in this because how does the United States guide bombs onto targets? GPS. How can Russia make life more difficult for its rivals? Monkey with GPS and tell ships they're in the wrong places. This is now a problem. And this was something that was raised after multiple U.S. Navy collisions last year. Was someone monkeying with the software that helped the Navy navigate its ships? The answer was no, but it was a plausible hypothesis. So we have that issue. We also have two major airports. Cyber issues in aviation continue to be something that's understudied. A friend of mine said, do you think the Google guys would let us look at the Google guys 767 and the flight control system and look for vulnerabilities there? And I said, no. And he said, why? I said, because Boeing would sue Google. Aviation software is a problem area. We're seeing that now. The 737 MAX problem had global reverberations. The good news is 737 MAX was a software error. It was not something that was exploited by an outside party. And then we've got the medical center. And this is an area, quite frankly, that there's been almost no attention paid. Medical devices, which are part of critical infrastructure for delivering medicine, are, in my opinion, a completely untouched area for cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And the problem is that, when these new devices are rolled out into hospitals, and they can be rolled out into your house as well. I mean, one of the telemedicine areas is having sensors in your home to deal with your chronic health issue. So that the hospital knows, oh, you're nosediving on your chronic illness. We better do an intervention. The problem is these devices never had security designed in mind. I don't know if there was any correlation between Dick Cheney getting a new heart and his electronic heart pump being removed, but there were vulnerabilities found in implants that go in human beings. So this is a problem. This is another area of cybersecurity interest that we can do. And then pipelines. Pipeline breaks have happened. The company in Dallas that makes the clearinghouse software that says, I'm company A, I want to buy X amount of gas, and I want it delivered on this day. That whole system was compromised by unattributed foreign actor. And so the pipeline industry now has a real interest in not only the computing that makes the actual liquid or gas move through the pipe, but also all of the buy and sell puts that are tied to those liquids and gases moving through the pipe. And then, perhaps most importantly, we have the entirely automated world's largest car wash at the Buc-ee's in Katy, which could be hacked. And I'm not suggesting that anyone try to do that today, but I am telling you that this is yet another piece of infrastructure run entirely by computer that can be subverted electronically. Now, if this happens in the next week and I have to go to jail, it wasn't me. I sometimes feel like that. Like, oh, that was a good idea. Like, oh, that's a good target. We should do that for like a senior research thing. Let's hack the car wash. So this is the space we occupy. There are plenty of opportunities in fixing this stuff. There are lots of jobs here. The pitch to students who are already in our master's program now, they're figuring out right now, do I want job X or Y in the field? And really it comes down to, is job X going to do my immigration paperwork? Are they going to give me a good signing bonus? Are they going to move me to a place I like? Can my spouse find a job there too? These are the issues that with cybersecurity as a workforce that we see. We have a grossly producing educational establishment in the United States for producing these people. And unfortunately, the government efforts, if you want a free degree in cybersecurity, you can have one. The bad news is you have to work for the US government. And if you're not an American, can you work for the US government? You can work for a contractor who works for the US government, but that's different. So that in a nutshell is the cyber infrastructure problem that I wanted to kind of lay out to an audience that I knew would be some people in the program who've heard all this crap before, and people who don't know a thing about it. So this is kind of a 50,000-foot view of where the problems lie, and there are discrete problems underneath us all over the place. My next one is a standard for security interoperability for maritime cargo operations. I'm going to a meeting in early May down at A&M Galveston where we're going to talk about this, because A&M Galveston is uniquely positioned to create a standard for this. And basically, we aren't speaking the same language in that space and many others. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions, and if anyone hasn't got pizza, you should get some pizza. Questions? Yes?
What's the top for the average consumer, something like that? So I'm buying equipment, what kinds of certifications or what am I looking for to say that this has been reviewed for security purposes?
That is a really solid question. So I can tell you, I have to buy a new toaster. My toaster's on the fritz. And when I'm buying a toaster, I want to make sure my toaster doesn't go up in flames, right? So what's the certification stamp that you see on toasters and consumer electronics over the world that tell you that it's not going to burn your house down? Underwriter's Lab. So years ago, a representative from Huawei came and asked me, would it be a smart idea for Huawei to create an Underwriter's Lab for IT? I was like, you could, but here's the problem. You, the producer, are going to certify that it's okay? And they said, yeah. And I said, you really don't know how the Underwriter's Lab works, do you? And it's kind of embarrassing to be like, do you know what an underwriter is? Well, they're an insurance company. Yeah, that's what they are. And why would the insurance companies care if your toaster burned your house down? Oh. So there's this whole dialogue on kind of your IT and what's certified as good or bad. That is kind of a discussion that keeps getting kicked down the road time after time, because essentially, and I made a slide about cyber insurances. Getting a company to pay on a cyber insurance policy is now very difficult because, were you doing everything possible to make sure that you were avoiding an incident? Can your insurance company say you were not, enforcing due diligence across the board? Maybe. So for personal use, the problem is that you just don't have a lot of information to go on besides what's available on the internet and telling you, oh, that's a pretty good piece of hardware. We can walk you through, if you ever want to come by and go through the security controls we tell companies to do, it's very similar for your own house. It's basically keeping things up to date is the most important thing, and looking for the unusual and unnecessary. Any other questions? Okay, well, I think we're just about on, oh, one more?
When you were talking about cybersecurity on a business level, or what about personal?
Well, unfortunately, personal cybersecurity is mostly a factor of what you choose to do. If you're not on Facebook, you will not have a Facebook security problem. If you choose not to run a Wi-Fi network in your house, you won't have a Wi-Fi problem. And then it really does come down to what the companies you choose to do business with across all of your different uses of technology. how well they're doing. It would be nice if there was a scoring rubric for this that we could all go to that Consumer Reports put out that said, these are better routers than those routers for security. The problem is that even the best technology and technology that's had enormous investment in it can have vulnerabilities in it that are unknown. Last summer it was the iPhone. A dissident in the United Arab Emirates was targeted by a government, we'll just leave it at that, likely supported by a technology consultancy. And in the process of responding to this problem, my colleagues at the University of Toronto determined that there were 3 unknown vulnerabilities on the iPhone, which is generally considered to be a pretty secure device. So that really is the problem with it. And the other side of it is liability. So if my car does something horrible to me, can I sue? Yes. If your operating system eats all of your term papers for this semester and they're all gone, can you sue Microsoft or Dell? Yeah, exactly. So we've never had product liability in software, and I just don't know when that's coming. That sounds like a landmark Supreme Court case to happen at some point, but I hope it's not after software kills me.
Do you suggest data protection says something like cyber insurance? Is that for business or
No, you can buy personal cyber insurance. I don't think it's really worth the money, which will get me a lot of negative votes on YouTube if this is posted on YouTube in the insurance industry. Maybe they'll want to come talk to me. But essentially, it's you want an insurance that you know you're paying into it and you'll collect on it when you need it. Right now, you don't have that kind of confidence in the insurances. And then as far as identity theft protection, some people rave about it, some people don't. My information was compromised in the Office of Personnel Management hack that was likely perpetrated by the Chinese. And then shortly thereafter, someone created an identity for me in China, and some malicious activity was pointed at one of my credit card accounts. Was that related? I don't know. But fortunately, I think we've reached a point now where the banks are getting pretty good at doing this predictive analytics of, oh, we think that something's wrong. But the simple answer is there is no kind of silver bullet to any of this stuff.
Thank you.
So I got one more question. So, so the recent passage of the GDPR and data privacy and all those regulations. So let's say like a nation state or a foreign actor, they exploit a company and they get a bunch of information. I guess would that just ramp up the fallout or consequences against kind of their targets?
We keep seeing bigger and bigger attacks happen. I think the banks have finally gotten it. They understand. They are investing what looks like an adequate amount of money to protect their resources and the resources of their customers. This doesn't exist in a lot of other areas. Obviously, the Facebooks and Googles of the world are keenly aware of Europe's role as a regulator on privacy. But this infrastructure stuff, we don't have the same sort of global standard making that's working today that's saying, if you're going to run a cargo port and its operations move containers around in these ways, here are the minimum safeguards for protecting computer systems that make that work. Here are the medium safeguards, and here is kind of the top level of potential activity. GDPR covers a small area of human endeavor. It's an important one. And it got companies noticed because the EU, Silicon Valley companies are still willing to work in Europe. It's a big market. The fines coming out of Europe for violations that occur when the European authorities feel that a company, usually a US company, has done something wrong, are now stretching into the billions of dollars, which is no longer chicken feed for even Google or for Facebook. So will there be national regimes on this stuff eventually? I think so. It's a job that has to be done. The problem is, do we want the Chinese, push regime? Do we want the Japanese regime? Do we want the EU regime? Does the United States want to be the leader in this space? None of that's really sorting out right now.
All right, at this point, we're just going to say thank you to Dr. Brown one more time. And also, I'm asking Andrew to please fill in the forms.